Hello everyone, welcome to this quick guide on how to use the calculator. So in this guide, I'll just explain basically all the tools that I've built into the calculator. If there's anything that I left out or if you have any questions, feel free to DM me in my Discord tags right here. So feel free to send a message over to me. So let's go. First, front page. All you really need to pay attention to is this legend right here. Blue cells, like these, are cells which you can change. These dark cells are cells which you should not be changing. They have formulas in them, and if you type something in it, it's going to mess with the formula, so don't do that. There's also change log if you just want to look at the changes that we've been making. And one other thing that you should look at is these things in it. So MCs have names AMC, GMC, and EMC. Who has a name can't have a space in it. Tags which have separate motion values. So for example, Jolly A4. So how Jolly's A4 works, theory crafting library, is he adds a bit of damage to his burst, his normal attacks, his skill at his Ascension 4. And it's going to display a single damage number, but you have to input it. So you can see here, you have to input it as two different damage types because that's just how it's easiest to do. Plus, it's a massive pain to have it as one. You would need a bunch more work on user and my part. And Ryan's resolve bonus needs to be entered in the same manner as bonus motion value. And what you can do is you can enter it in the stacks row, or you can just enter it in occurrences to increase its multiplier. And I'll explain how that works. So we have a couple characters. I have all the 4 characters in here already, just so that you don't have to watch me inputting stuff for 10 minutes. So you have character name, their character level, talent levels. So like 9 and 9, you could do 9, 12, 9, 9, 12, 12, whatever. Then you have their elements, so the normal attack element, charge attack element, plunging attack element. And these can be changed up to whatever you want. So for example, let's say we have Kazuo. Kazuo would do Fizz normal, Fizz charged, and then whatever, it would be Animo plunging damage, skill would be Animo, his skill echo would be whatever he absorbs. So let's say it's Pyro. And that's because of his A1. And his A1 Soma on swordsmanship is counted as plunging damage. So we say plunging. And then his burst is Animo, and his burst echo, let's say he absorbs Pyro, and his burst echo is burst type damage. So that's an example of how you would do this for a unit like Kazuha, who has a bunch of different types of damage. So now let's go on to the enemy info. So enemy info you can only control on character 1 page. You can't control it here because it doesn't exist. So you set their enemy level, their resistance to every single element. Dendro res is not actually used right now, so you don't need to care about that. But everything else you can change resistance to. And resistance, so if we VV shred, it's -30. It'll automatically have by itself, you don't need to have. Also, if you go like above 75% resistance, it'll apply the above 75% resistance formula by itself. You don't need to do that. Weapon, you can just type in weapon name. So let's say I want to change this to Viridescent Hunt. And then you will have Viridescent Hunt. You can have Rust. You also have a drop-down menu, and you can pick any weapon you want, even like weapons that would not normally belong on your character. The refinement, weapon stacks. Weapon stacks is, for example, Thundering Pulse. Can have 1, 2, or 3 stacks, and I can just enter 1, 2, or 3, and that will just automatically change it based on whatever number you entered it. Weapon toggle is based on whether or not the weapon has a toggle ability. So for example, Slingshot only activates its passive when you're at a certain range. So if you have the passive on, it says this. If you have it off, number decreases. So yeah, so that's how this weapon passive and the weapon toggle stuff works. Same with artifact sets. So for example, Blizzard Strayer, go back to Rust. Blizzard Strayer has a stack effect technically, because you can either have enemy applied with cryo or enemies frozen. So 2-piece Blizzard Strayer, 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. As you have 2 stacks, this counts as enemy being frozen. 1 stack counts as enemy being cryo applied, and 0 counts as enemy having no aura on them. And as you saw, at 1 and at 2, they were the same number in this final damage, and that's because we're already above 100% crit rate. So it's not going to make a difference. So let's change this back to Shimenawa's. If you have something here, like Shimenawa's does not have stack effects. So if I have this at 0, at 1, it does not make a difference. Shimenawa's does, however, have a toggleable effect. So if I uncheck this, then this number goes down. Check it back. So this is Yoimiya's main stats, attack, pyro, crit rate. And these artifacts, you can change the level, you can change the rarity. If you have 4-star, you can only have a maximum of 16. So as you can see, NA, because HP is broken since you can't have a level 24-star, so you need to change to 16. And it's 4-star with the space in between. Sorry, no, with the dash. And then this is fixed. So 5-star, 20. Now, buffs. So these buffs you should have as buffs which unconditionally apply to your character. So for example, let's say you have Pyro Resonance in your team. This team does not, but let's say you do. Then you would put 25 because that applies unconditionally. You cannot remove the buff. It does not fall off after a certain while. Other buffs like Viridescent Venerer, I wouldn't put in this area, and I wouldn't put here because they only last for a certain amount of time, which means that they're not applying to every single one of your character's attacks. Any buff you put here will apply to every single one of your character's attacks. Now, number of subs, if you just want to follow KQM standards, just leave this at 40 with subcaps, KQMC, whatever ER requirement you calculate with the energy recharge calculator, and 2 flat subs per stat. And then that will say you have to have 2 flat subs in each of these, and you can have I'll ignore that and look at that later. And then you can have a maximum of this many subs in each of these stats. So as you can see, crit damage is capped at 12. So I can only have a maximum of 12, even though having more would make this ratio better. So that's this is the same thing for every single character page, so we're done. So now let's look at the rotation assembler. The rotation assembler looks pretty small, but there are a lot of menus on the sidebar which can be expanded. So for example, for some reason this... Oh, there we go. That's what was wrong. But for example, let's just open this very first menu. So this healing menu just tells you if a move does healing. I think this might be broken right now. I'm not sure, but I will check on it. But none of my characters right here actually heal, I don't think. So right now, this wouldn't work. And the reason why you have a healing thing is because of Ocean Hued Clan. Also, if you just want to calculate. But what you do is you can calculate how much healing there is. And then you can plug it into these Ocean Hued Clan calcs, which are kind of still a work in progress. There's not a real easy way to automate it yet because I don't have frames. And Ocean Hued Clan only procs once every 3 seconds. So you need to say like, these attacks belong to the first proc, these attacks belong to the second proc, and the only real easy way to do that is just manually. But once I get that set up, I will also add a video guide on how you can do Ocean Hued Clan procs because it's kind of an involved process. So you want the healing stat scaler. So for example, some characters scale off their own HP, their heals scale off their own HP. Some characters' heals scale off other people's HP. So it's kind of complicated. Also, every single heal in the game is split into 2 types. Well, not every single, but most of them are split into 2 types. So let's go to Bennett, for example. Bennett's Burst, we have this split into continuous regeneration per second scaling, the percentage, and continuous regeneration per second, which is flat. So, for example, let's change Jolly to Bennett. So Bennett. So burst regeneration continuous. It actually isn't broken. That's great. And burst regeneration flat. So as you can see, one of them is scaling off of, let's say, Bennett is the one on field being healed. So this is how much he will heal per tick from his percentage, and this is how much he will heal per tick from flat. And these will both happen at the same time. The number you see on screen will be the sum of these two. It's just they are considered separate parts. And that was not supposed to do that, but whatever. That's fine. But let's delete this and change this back to Jolly. And delete this as well. All right. So now we have all of that set up. Let's close this menu, and then let me explain how this top part works. So this top part, pretty simple. You input the character, then after you input a character, it will create a drop-down list for you of every single attack that that character has. So it has like aim shots, C6 damage for Yoimiya, the weapon procs, overload, shatter, electrocharge, whatever. So let me actually explain what that weapon proc thing does. And in order to do that, let me swap Yoimiya's weapon over to Viridescent Hunt. So Viridescent Hunt has a proc effect, the vortex thing. So what I need to do if I want to say that Yoimiya procs at once is I need to select weapon proc. And then I have a drop-down menu in this weapon proc selection, and I can select Cyclone. And then this is how much it will do. This should hit 8 times. I think I already was demonstrating this before, which is why I already have 8 there. It will hit 8 times, and it will do that much damage. And it is Fizz element, it scales up attack, and it does not have a damage type. Some weapon procs, for example, Redhorn Stone Thresher. I spelled that wrong. Stone Thresher. Okay. Will scale off of different. We'll have a damage type. So, for example, weapon proc and Redhorn normal proc. So it is considered normal damage. It scales off defense, and the element is Pyro because Yoimiya's normal attacks are Pyro. And then it has a multiplier of 80% of your character's defense. So let's go back to Rust. That's a quick guide on how to do weapon procs. And if you didn't know, these procs are always going to be considered. Like the procs don't have to necessarily be Fizz. Like it doesn't just have to be like Wandering Clouds from Skyward Atlas. It can also be like the Donuts 1% HP conversion to normal. And that all shows in one number on screen, like Jolly's A4, but you have to input it separately because they scale off of different things. Like Redhorn scales off defense, while Ito's charge attacks scale off attack. So you can't have them in the same column. It just doesn't work out that way. So let's close out the weapon proc menu. Now let's look at Shenhe and Yunjin. And this is why I use Yoimiya here, because I need Yunjin to explain this. So Yunjin, how Yunjin and Shenhe work is you put in a, if you have them, then you have to open this menu. You select either Shenhe Cools or Yunjin Burst Most. It looks up the character, like it will look up Yunjin's stats here, and then it will determine how much damage they do. So for example, let's say we have, what is this, 16,000 right now? Let's just copy that value. And then let's change Yunjin's stats by a bit. So let's say she has an attack percent goblet for some reason. Now this damage is lower because Yunjin's stats on defense lowered. So that means that you actually need to have the character in one of your Car 1, Car 2, Car 3, Car 4 menus. You can't just have a random thing here. You have to actually have a character to represent that person. So if you want to adjust their stats, so let's say like Yunjin for some reason has a 25% attack defense bonus, then we can just add in 25% here, and then now this damage goes up by a bit. And let's say she has a 50,000 flat defense bonus, then this number goes up by a lot. Let's see. So there's also a number of procs, and this will be multiplied by the number of occurrences. So for example, let's say Ayaka's Q hits 2 targets, and we're calculating the damage done to both targets. If I say Ayaka's Q hits 2 targets in this occurrences thing, then I don't also need to say Shenhe's Quill procs twice, because then that will be 4 procs in total. It should only be 2 procs because 2 targets, but they're only hit once. So Shenhe's Quill, I would just put 1 here and 2 here, because this number is multiplied by this number. Now let's open Yoimiya menu, and this is simple. It's just, is your skill active for this? It goes and looks up the value there, and then it will do that for you. All right, sorry, I had to take care of something. Now we close this menu. Occurrences. So this is just how many times this thing happens. So let's say we're calculating something and we say Kazuha swirls 5 times actually. So then we just do this by 5, and number that was here is now multiplied by 5. Pretty simple. Override, it's just if you want this damage number to be replaced by something else. Like, let's say there's some, like, let's say you just want to replace it because of some sort of weird buff thing. So we can just put like that, and then this number will just be replaced by whatever is here. So now let's talk about conditional buffs. So conditional buffs you enter by opening the second menu, and every single number here will only apply to the column in which it's in. So for example, let's say Yoimiya, right? So this first hit has a 32% pyro damage buff because that's from Kazuha. As you can see, R2 final EM, which is Kazuha's final EM, because Kazuha is CAR 2, and you can really quickly grab character stats from here. So let's say I want Yoimiya's base attack. So Yoimiya's CAR 1, right? I can just say equals CAR 1 base attack. And then you can do this for like Bennett and Star who scale off their base attacks. Their buffs scale off their base attacks, so you can grab those stats easily. Or for Kazuha who scales off his EM, things like that. And now that we've grabbed that, this damage buff will only apply to this attack. So let's delete this, for example, and then now this attack's damage goes down. And this is true for every single one of these numbers. They will only apply to the column in which they're in. And I have another thing that I will ignore for now. These are all just random things that I use for debugging, but you can look at them as well. So like a bunch of numbers that I use for calculating, helper rows, etc., etc., etc. And then now let's talk about two last things, or actually three last things, which are Raiden. Raiden is a bit complicated to do. So Raiden. As you can see, Raiden has, every single time she does a normal attack, right? She also has a resolve bonus, but that's not calculated into this damage itself. You have to instead add in her resolve bonus. So normal attack resolve bonus per stack. So let's say she has, let's say she has 60 stacks of resolve. So I would just put 60 here. And then that's how this resolve bonus works. And then let's say you had 2 of these normal 1 hits, then you would do 120, 3, you would do 180, etc. And on her burst, you want to just do Musorishi initial slash Musorishi Tosachi base. Yeah. Then let's do initial hit resolve bonus per stack and 60. Let's change this back to Yoimiya. And I think I said 3 last things, so it's actually 2 because I said I'd be doing Ocean Heat Clam in another video. And then you can just see cumulative damage, cumulative healing, rotation length. This is something that you have to control yourself. So like 20, 15, and as you can see, the DPS number goes up as I reduce rotation length. Team DPS damage, which is just the sum of all these rows with your characters, and then each character's percentage of total damage. And you can just enter in the results in this page. You can just follow the format that I already have here. And that's really it. There aren't really other things that you have to know in order to use the damage calculator. That's mostly it. DM me if you have any questions.